She had 3 minutes to save a $2 billion empire. But nobody knew the woman in the burgundy vest was a mathematical genius hiding in plain sight. When her fingers flew across that keyboard solving what MIT graduates couldn't crack, she didn't just rescue his fortune. She exposed a thief who'd been stealing for years from him, from her family, from hundreds of innocent people. He thought he was just having a business dinner. He had no idea she was about to save his company, destroy a predator, and change both their lives forever. This is the true story of how one moment of courage brought justice to the powerless and proved that brilliance can't be buried. And I promise you, this story will make you never look at service workers the same way again. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends, to Whispers of Fate Stories. If you're tuned in and excited for today's story, don't forget to hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I've got another amazing story coming your way, and you won't want to miss it. Let me tell you about a woman named Michelle. 26 years old, serving wine and perfectly plated entrees at Maison Bellevue in downtown Atlanta. Every evening, she'd smooth down her burgundy vest, pin back her natural hair, and smile at customers who never really saw her. To them, she was just the waitress. The one who knew which wine paired with the sea base. The one who was always gracious, even when they weren't. But here's what they didn't know. Michelle had a master's degree in data analytics and financial systems from Georgia Tech. She graduated at the top of her class with a thesis that made professors call her once in a generation. She had job offers from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and 3 Silicon Valley startups. She had a future so bright it could have lit up the Atlanta skyline. So why was she carrying plates instead of coding algorithms that could change the financial world? Because 2 years ago, her mother died. Patricia Dara, a beautiful, strong woman who worked 2 jobs to put Michelle through school. A woman who fought breast cancer with dignity and courage. But while Patricia was fighting for her life, someone else was stealing hers. A financial advisor who promised to help with medical bills, who said he had special investment opportunities for cancer patients. He was so kind, so understanding, so trustworthy. And while Patricia was too sick to notice, he drained every penny. Her life insurance payout, her retirement savings, the college fund she'd built for Michelle's younger brother. $180,000 gone, vanished into offshore accounts and fake investments. When Patricia died, she left behind 2 children, crushing medical debt, and nothing else. No inheritance. No safety net. Just Michelle, 24 years old with a brand new master's degree, and Jamal, her 14-year-old brother with type 1 diabetes. Jamal needed insulin. He needed doctor visits. He needed someone to make sure he didn't die the way their mother did, broke and broken. So Michelle made a choice. She turned down Wall Street. She stayed in Atlanta. She took a job at the finest restaurant in the city because the tips were good and the schedule let her be home when Jamal got out of school. She traded her dreams for his survival. She traded her keyboard for a wine list. And every single night, when she smiled at wealthy diners who didn't bother to learn her name, a piece of her heart cracked a little more. Now, let me tell you about the man who walked into her restaurant one Tuesday evening in October. His name was Rick J. Smith, and he was a very different kind of successful. While other tech CEOs dressed like college students, Rick wore custom-tailored suits and carried himself like someone who'd built an empire from nothing, because he had. At 38, he turned Titan Pay into a fintech powerhouse that processed $50 million in transactions every single day. If you paid for anything online, there was a good chance Rick's company handled it. He came to Maison Bellevue for emergency meetings. Always the corner table with the view of the city lights. Always with executives in expensive suits making decisions that affected thousands of lives. He was handsome in that sharp, intense way, dark hair precisely cut, eyes that missed nothing, jaw that looked carved from granite. He tipped well but absently, the way rich people do when money isn't real to them anymore. He never really noticed Michelle. Why would he? She was just the woman who poured his scotch. But Michelle noticed him. She noticed everything about her customers. It was part of being invisible. You learned to read people when they didn't know you were watching. She noticed the stress lines deepening around Rick's eyes over the past few weeks. The way his shoulders stayed rigid even when he tried to relax. The fact that his phone rang constantly and he kept declining calls with increasingly tense expressions. The way his jaw clenched when a CTO whispered something urgent across the table. On this particular Tuesday evening, Rick looked worse than Michelle had ever seen him. His tie was loosened, unusual for him. His eyes had dark circles beneath them. His normally steady hands trembled slightly as he opened his laptop at the table, which his CTO and another man in an expensive suit leaned over with concerned expressions. Michelle approached with the wine list, and that's when she saw it. The laptop screen.
Code.
Dense, complex financial algorithms scrolling past. Payment processing architecture. And it was catastrophically wrong. Michelle's brilliant mind, that Georgia tech-trained genius brain she'd been hiding for 2 years, couldn't help but see it. Line 283. A recursive function call. The payment gateway was calling the validation protocol inside itself, creating an infinite loop that would cascade through the entire system. She saw it as clearly as if someone had written, "This will destroy everything," across the screen in red letters. "Good evening, gentlemen," Michelle said smoothly, her voice perfectly professional despite her heart suddenly pounding. "May I start you with something from the bar?" "Scotch."
Neat.
"The Macallan 18, Rick said without looking up, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. His CTO ordered the same. The older man, his board advisor, Michelle guessed, just shook his head grimly. Michelle walked away to place their drink order, but she couldn't stop seeing that code. Her hands shook as she entered their order into the terminal. Her mind was screaming at her. They didn't see the problem. These highly paid executives, these MIT and Stanford graduates, they were missing the fatal flaw. And she glanced at the digital clock behind the bar. They were running out of time. But helping meant being seen. Being seen meant questions. Questions meant explanations. And explanations meant admitting she had abilities far beyond serving tables. It meant facing the pity, the confusion, the inevitable question, "If you're so smart, why are you here?" It meant watching them realize she was trapped by circumstances, by family obligations, by a system that didn't care how brilliant you were if you didn't have the freedom to use your gifts. Michelle delivered their drinks. Rick didn't acknowledge her. The CTO was typing frantically. The older man was on his phone, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. She caught fragments. "Stock price will crater. Investors will pull out. We're looking at complete system failure." 2 hours passed. Michelle served them appetizers they didn't eat. She refilled drinks they barely touched. She watched Rick's desperation grow with each passing minute. His phone kept ringing, investors, board members, journalists, and he kept declining every call. His laptop screen kept showing error messages in angry red text. Test runs failing. System crashes. A countdown timer in the corner that made Michelle's stomach drop. 68 hours until the IPO launch. Around them, the restaurant hummed with normal life. Couples celebrating anniversaries. Business deals closing over dessert. Laughter and champagne, and people whose biggest worry was whether to order the creme brulee. None of them knew they were sitting 20 feet away from a financial disaster about to wipe out billions. Michelle made her decision. She walked over with a fresh bottle of their scotch. Her hands were steady now. Her voice was calm. "Gentlemen, I couldn't help but notice you're working on a critical system issue," she said quietly. Rick's head snapped up. He looked at her like he'd forgotten she existed. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your code," Michelle continued, her heart hammering but her voice level. Line 283. Your payment gateway is calling the validation function recursively. It's creating an infinite loop that's cascading through your entire processing architecture. The table went silent. The CTO's mouth literally fell open. The older man stopped mid-sentence on his phone. Rick stared at Michelle like she'd just spoken in an alien language. "What did you just say?" Rick's voice was barely above a whisper. "The error isn't in your security protocol or your encryption layer," Michelle said, the words tumbling out now because she'd crossed the line and there was no going back. "It's in line 283. You're defining the validation parameters inside the payment call instead of before it. The system doesn't know whether to process the payment or validate the user first, so it keeps asking itself the same question in an endless loop. Each iteration multiplies the processing load until the entire system crashes under its own weight. Rick slowly stood up. He towered over her, his expression a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been hope. How could you possibly? He looked at her uniform, her name tag, her wine-stained apron. Who are you? I'm nobody, Michelle said, taking a step back, suddenly aware that every eye in the restaurant was now on them. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have looked. I shouldn't have said anything.
No.
Wait. Rick grabbed his laptop and spun it toward her, his movements almost frantic. If you can see the problem, can you fix it? Michelle looked around the restaurant. Her manager was watching from the kitchen door with a confused expression. Her coworkers had stopped serving. The other diners were staring. She looked at Rick's desperate face, at the code that was so obviously broken, at the countdown timer ticking away their last chance. I can't, she whispered. I need to get back to work. Please. Rick's voice cracked, and Michelle realized this powerful billionaire was on the edge of breaking. I have an IPO launch in 3 days. If this system fails, I lose everything. 3,000 employees lose their jobs. 8 years of work disappears. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses who use our platform lose their payment processing. I'm begging you. Michelle looked into his eyes and saw something she recognized. Desperation. The same desperation she felt every time she calculated how many shifts she needed to work to afford Jamal's insulin. The same fear she felt every time her brother's blood sugar dropped and she wondered if this was the time she wouldn't catch it. The same exhaustion from carrying weight that was crushing her. And she thought about her mother, dying in that hospital bed, whispering, "Use your gifts, baby. Don't hide your light." She thought about the man who'd stolen from her family while pretending to help. She thought about spending the rest of her life being invisible, wasting her genius on wine pairings while the world burned. Give me 3 minutes, Michelle said. Rick J. Smith had no idea that those 3 minutes would expose a criminal, save his empire, and change both of their lives forever. Michelle T. Dara's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., the same time it did every morning. She reached across the narrow bed in her studio apartment and silenced it before it could wake Jamal sleeping on the pull-out couch in the living room. The apartment was small, just 600 square feet in a building that had seen better decades, but it was clean and safe and, most importantly, affordable on a waitress's salary. She moved quietly through her morning routine. Check Jamal's blood sugar monitor on her phone, 118, stable through the night. Thank God.
Start the coffee.
Lay out his insulin and testing kit on the kitchen counter, where he'd see it when he woke up. Leave a note reminding him about his after-school tutoring session and $20 for dinner, because she'd be working the late shift again. In the bathroom mirror, Michelle pinned her natural hair back into the neat, professional-style Maison Bellevue required. She looked at her reflection and barely recognized herself anymore. 2 years ago, she'd been walking across the stage at Georgia Tech, master's degree in hand, job offers from 3 major Wall Street firms waiting. Her thesis advisor had called her work revolutionary, a new algorithm for detecting financial fraud patterns that could have changed how banks protected their customers. Goldman Sachs had offered her $180,000 a year to start. But that was before the cancer came back with a vengeance. Before the financial advisor with a kind smile and expensive suit convinced her mother that he could help manage medical bills through special investment opportunities. Before Patricia Dara died in a hospital bed, whispering apologies for leaving them with nothing. Before Michelle discovered that every penny of her mother's life insurance, her retirement savings, and the college fund meant for Jamal had disappeared into fraudulent schemes. Before she became someone who chose between her dreams and her brother's insulin. Michelle pulled on her burgundy vest, smoothed the white shirt underneath, and pinned her name tag over her heart. The vest felt like armor and a prison at the same time. At Maison Bellevue, she was practically invisible, just another efficient server moving between tables of wealthy diners making deals over $200 steaks. They never looked at her face. They never wondered about her story. They saw the uniform and their brains filled in the rest. Just the help. No one important. No one worth noticing. But Michelle noticed everything. She noticed which couples were cheating on their spouses, conducting affairs over candlelit dinners. She noticed which business deals were shady, overhearing terms that made her data analytics brain scream fraud. She noticed stock tips, merger discussions, financial strategies worth millions, all spoken freely around her because people forgot that invisible didn't mean deaf or stupid. She was brilliant with numbers. Always had been. In third grade, she'd corrected her teacher's math on the board. In high school, she'd helped her mother's friends file their taxes, catching errors that saved them thousands. At Georgia Tech, professors had encouraged her to pursue a PhD, publish papers, maybe even start her own fintech company someday. Now she used that same brilliant mind to calculate tip percentages and memorize wine pairings. Michelle kissed Jamal's forehead before she left. He stirred slightly, mumbling something about needing new sneakers, another expense she'd have to figure out. She grabbed her bus pass and headed out into the pre-dawn darkness of Atlanta, leaving behind her sleeping brother and the life she might have had. By 6 a.m., she was at Maison Bellevue, tying her apron and preparing to be invisible for another day. Rick J. Smith arrived at Maison Bellevue at 7 p.m. sharp, which was unusual. He normally came for lunch meetings, controlled and precise affairs where he dominated the conversation and left within an hour. But tonight, he practically burst through the door with two men in expensive suits flanking him like bodyguards. Michelle recognized one as David Chin, Titan Pay's CTO. She'd served him before. The other was older, silver-haired, carrying himself with the weight of serious money. Board member, Michelle guessed. Maybe investor. Corner table. Now, Rick said to the hostess, his voice tight. No pleasantries. No charm. This was a man in crisis mode. Michelle watched from the bar as they settled at table 12, the private corner booth with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Rick didn't even glance at the menu. He opened his laptop before his jacket was off, and the other two men immediately crowded around the screen. Even from 15 feet away, Michelle could see the tension in their shoulders, the way Rick's jaw was clenched so hard it had to hurt. I'll take that table, Michelle told Marcus, the other server assigned to that section. He looked relieved. Emergency meetings meant distracted customers who forgot to tip. She approached with water glasses and menus, her professional smile firmly in place. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Maison Bellevue. None of them looked up. Rick's fingers flew across the keyboard while David pointed at something on the screen.
There. See?
The validation protocol keeps timing out. Every single test transaction is failing. How long until the IPO launch? The older man asked, his voice grave. 72 hours, Rick said. And if we can't process payments, we don't have a company. Michelle set down their water glasses, and that's when she saw the laptop screen. Lines of code cascaded past, complex financial algorithms, payment processing architecture, security protocols. Her Georgia Tech-trained brain absorbed it instantly, pattern recognition firing, before she could stop it. And there, buried in the middle of a validation function, she saw the fatal flaw. Line 283. A recursive call. The payment gateway was invoking the validation function, which was calling the payment gateway, which was calling the validation function, an infinite loop that would multiply with each transaction until the entire system collapsed under its own computational weight. Can I start you with drinks? Michelle asked, her voice steady despite her heart suddenly hammering. Scotch. The Macallan 18. Neat, Rick muttered, not looking up. Actually, bring the bottle. The other men ordered without glancing at her. Michelle was furniture to them. Invisible. She walked away on autopilot, her mind racing. They couldn't see it. These brilliant men with their MIT degrees and decades of experience, they were looking right at the problem and missing it completely. She delivered their drinks. They barely acknowledged her. She brought appetizers they didn't touch. She refilled glasses they forgot to drink from. And she watched them spiral deeper into panic as the hours passed. We've had 15 engineers working on this for 3 weeks, David said, his voice cracking. How is this possible? The code was solid in beta testing. Someone sabotaged it, the older man said darkly. This feels deliberate. Rick ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, destroying it. I don't care if it's sabotage or incompetence. I need it fixed.
Now.
Michelle's hands trembled as she cleared their untouched plates. Line 283. 3 words. That's all it would take to save them. But speaking meant being seen. Being seen meant questions. Questions meant explaining why someone with a master's degree in data analytics was serving them dinner. It meant watching their expressions change from desperation to confusion to pity. It meant admitting out loud that she'd buried her gifts to keep her brother alive. She retreated to the kitchen, but she couldn't escape the image of that code. Her brilliant mind kept circling back to it, seeing the solution so clearly it was almost painful. Fix the recursive call. Restructure the validation protocol. Optimize the processing flow. She could solve it in 3 minutes. Maybe less. But at what cost? Her safety was in invisibility. Her survival depended on staying small. Michelle watched through the kitchen window as Rick's phone rang for the dozenth time. He declined the call again, his face pale. She saw him check the countdown timer on his screen. 68 hours until everything he'd built crumbled. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Don't hide your light, baby. Michelle took a deep breath, picked up a fresh bottle of scotch, and made her choice. Michelle approached their table with the bottle of scotch, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The restaurant noise faded to a dull hum. This was it. The moment she stopped being invisible. Gentlemen, she said quietly, setting down the bottle. I couldn't help but notice your system issue. Line 283. Your payment gateway is calling the validation function inside itself. The table went completely silent. Rick's head snapped up so fast she heard his neck crack. He stared at her like she'd materialized out of thin air, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. David's mouth fell open. The older man stopped mid-sentence on his phone. What did you just say? Rick's voice was barely a whisper. Michelle's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. The error isn't in your security protocol or encryption layer. Line 283. You're defining the validation parameters inside the payment call instead of before it. It creates a recursive loop. Each transaction multiplies the processing load until the system crashes. Rick stood up slowly, towering over her. How could you possibly? He looked at her burgundy vest, her name tag, the wine bottle in her hands. His expression shifted from shock to desperate hope. Who are you? Someone who notices things, Michelle said.
Her mouth was dry.
Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear back into the safety of invisibility. But she'd come this far. May I? She gestured to the laptop. Rick stared at her for 3 long seconds, then stepped aside without a word. Michelle set down the bottle and slid into the booth, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. You have 3 minutes, the older man said. Then I'm calling security. Michelle's fingers hit the keys and muscle memory took over. 2 years of serving tables vanished. She was back at Georgia Tech, back in her element, back to being the person she was supposed to be. She scrolled to line 283, isolated the recursive call, and began rewriting. Her fingers flew. She restructured the validation protocol to execute before the payment gateway. She optimized the processing flow to reduce computational overhead. She found 2 other vulnerabilities they hadn't even noticed yet and patched them. Her brain operated at the speed it was designed for, seeing patterns and solutions that would take others hours to comprehend. 2 minutes and 47 seconds later, she hit enter. The error messages disappeared. The screen turned green. Clean code hummed to life. David grabbed the laptop and ran diagnostics, his hands shaking. His eyes went wider with each test. The validation protocol is executing flawlessly. Processing speed increased by 43%. System load reduced by half. He looked up at Michelle like she was a ghost. This is impossible. Who are you? Michelle stood up, smoothing down her vest with trembling hands. The weight of what she'd just done crashed over her. She'd exposed herself. There was no going back to invisible now. I'm nobody important, she said quietly. Just someone who's good with numbers. She picked up the scotch bottle. Your meal is on the house tonight, gentlemen. Consider it our apology for the interruption. She turned to walk away, but Rick's hand shot out and caught her wrist. Not rough, but firm. Desperate. Wait, he said.
Please.
I need to know who you are. Michelle looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. She saw confusion there and awe, and something else, recognition. Not of her, but of what she represented. A solution. A lifeline.
Hope.
My name is Michelle, she said softly. Michelle Dara. And I really need to get back to work before my manager fires me. Michelle's shift ended at 11 p.m., 2 hours later than usual because the restaurant had been slammed. Her feet ached, her back hurt, and all she wanted was to collapse into bed. She pushed through the back door into the employee parking lot, digging in her purse for her bus pass. Michelle, wait. She spun around. Rick J. Smith stood beside a gleaming black Tesla, still in his suit despite the late hour. He must have been waiting. For her. Mr. Smith, I've had teams of MIT graduates working on that problem for 3 weeks, he said, walking toward her. His voice wasn't angry. It was awed.
Confused.
15 engineers. PhDs in computer science. People I pay $500,000 a year. You solved it in 3 minutes. Michelle clutched her purse tighter. I got lucky. I just saw something they missed. Don't. Rick stopped a few feet away. Don't diminish what you did. That wasn't luck. That was genius. He paused. My CTO ran a full analysis after you left. You didn't just fix the error. You rebuilt the entire architecture. You found vulnerabilities we didn't know existed. You optimized systems we thought were already perfect. His eyes searched her face. So, I need to know.
Who are you really?
And please don't tell me you're nobody. Rick extended his hand. Full system access. Complete transparency. 50,000 upfront, and if you find who's trying to destroy me, there's a permanent position with my company waiting. His hand stayed steady between them. Do we have a deal? Michelle thought about Jamal sleeping on their pull-out couch. About her mother whispering, use your gifts. About 2 years of being invisible while her brilliant mind slowly suffocated. About the chance, maybe the only chance she'd ever get, to be who she was meant to be. She shook his hand. We have a deal. When do I start?
Rick smiled for the first time that night.
How about right now? My office is 10 minutes away, and I have a very expensive problem that needs your very expensive brain. Michelle pulled out her phone and texted Jamal. Working late. Emergency consulting job. Love you. Take your insulin in the morning. Then she followed Rick J. Smith to his Tesla and toward a future she'd thought was dead and buried. Michelle worked every night for 2 weeks, collapsing into bed at 3 a.m. only to wake at dawn for her restaurant shifts. Her eyes burned from staring at screens. Her fingers ached from typing. But her mind was alive in ways it hadn't been in years, firing on all cylinders, doing what it was built to do. Rick had given her a workspace in Titan Pay's headquarters, a glass office overlooking the Atlanta skyline with 3 monitors and unlimited coffee. He'd also given her something more valuable, complete access. Every line of code, every transaction log, every system architecture document. No restrictions. No oversight. Just trust. She started by mapping the entire system, payment gateways, validation protocols, encryption layers, user authentication, fraud detection algorithms. Titan Pay processed $50 million daily through 17,000 lines of code, and Michelle absorbed it all like a sponge, soaking up water. She built visualization models, traced data flows, identified dependencies and vulnerabilities. And then she started seeing the pattern. It was subtle. Brilliant, actually. Small discrepancies in transaction routing that her fraud detection algorithms flagged. $2,000 redirected here. $5,000 there. Amounts small enough that they'd get lost in the noise of 50 million in daily transactions, routed through shell accounts and complex laundering schemes that would take forensic accountants months to untangle. But Michelle wasn't a forensic accountant. She was a pattern recognition specialist. And once she saw the pattern, she couldn't unsee it. Rick, She called out at midnight on the 13th day. He was still in his office. The man barely slept. "You need to see this." He came immediately, coffee in hand, tie loosened. "What did you find?" Michelle pulled up her analysis on the main screen. "Someone's been stealing from you for 3 years. Small amounts, continuous theft, carefully hidden in transaction noise. I estimate 40,000 to 50,000 monthly." Rick's face went pale. "That's over $1 million. At least." Michelle highlighted another section of code. "But that's not the scary part. Look at this." She pulled up a deeply buried subroutine, hidden inside what appeared to be routine maintenance code. "This is a time bomb, set to trigger in 72 hours during your IPO announcement." "What does it do?" Michelle's fingers flew across the keyboard, showing him the cascade effect. "It creates cascading payment failures. Every transaction processed during the trigger window will fail and bounce back. The system will appear to be completely broken. Stock price will crater. Investor confidence will evaporate."
She met his eyes.
"Someone could buy controlling shares of your company for pennies on the dollar while everyone thinks Titan Pay is worthless." Rick stared at the screen, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping.
Who?
"Who has access to plant this? That's what bothers me most." Michelle highlighted the coding signature, the specific syntax choices, the variable naming conventions, the logic structure. "This isn't amateur work. This is someone with deep financial systems knowledge. Someone who understands payment processing architecture at an expert level." She pulled up comparison analyses. "Someone with the same level of expertise as your senior engineers. Maybe better. One of my own people. Not just your people, Rick. This level of access." Michelle pointed to the authentication logs. "This code was planted using executive-level credentials. Only 5 people in your company have this clearance." Rick's hands gripped the edge of her desk. "My CTO, my CFO, my head of security, my chief operating officer, and me. For people you trust completely," Michelle said quietly. "One of them is destroying you. And in 72 hours, they're going to succeed unless we stop them." Michelle spent the next 18 hours tracing every fingerprint in the malicious code. She mapped login timestamps, tracked file modifications, analyzed keystroke patterns. The trail led deeper and deeper into Titan Pay's executive systems, past security protocols that should have been impenetrable. Whoever planted this bomb knew exactly how to hide their tracks. At 4 a.m. on the 3rd day, she found it. "Rick." Her voice came out flat, emotionless. The tone she used when her emotions were too big to let out. "I know who it is." He was beside her in seconds, still dressed in yesterday's shirt. Neither of them had gone home. "Show me." Michelle pulled up the authentication logs, the digital fingerprints that couldn't lie. The code was uploaded from this terminal. Executive-level access. Timestamps match across 3 years of theft. She highlighted the username. mthorn_CFO. Rick went completely still.
"No."
"Marcus Thornton. Your CFO." Michelle kept her voice steady as she pulled up more evidence. Every piece of malicious code traces back to his credentials. Every stolen transaction routes through accounts he controls. "That's impossible." Rick's voice was barely a whisper. "Marcus built this company with me. He's been with me from the beginning. He's like," his voice cracked. "He was at my father's funeral. He's been like a father to me since Dad died." "I'm sorry, Rick. But the evidence is..." "The evidence is wrong." Rick slammed his hand on the desk, making her monitors shake. "Marcus mentored me. He taught me everything about this industry. He could be running his own company, but he stayed with me because he believed in what we were building." Michelle understood denial. She'd lived in it herself when her mother's accounts first showed discrepancies. But evidence didn't lie. "Rick, look at this." She pulled up financial trading records. "Marcus Thornton has been shorting Titan Pay stock for the past 6 months. Heavily. He's positioned to make $300 million when your company crashes." Rick stared at the screen. The color drained from his face. $300 million. "He's not just sabotaging you. He's profiting from your destruction." Michelle's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up more data. The IPO crash will trigger his short positions. He'll make a fortune, then use that money to buy controlling shares when the price bottoms out. He doesn't want to destroy Titan Pay. He wants to steal it. Rick sank into a chair, looking like he'd been punched in the gut.
Why?
We split equity. He owns 30% already. If the company succeeds, he'll make billions legitimately. Maybe billions wasn't enough. Michelle pulled up Marcus's financial history. Maybe he couldn't wait. Maybe she stopped. Her blood turned to ice. Oh my God.
What?
What is it? Michelle's hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. She pulled up public records, corporate filings, legal name change documents. The world tilted sideways as pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Marcus Thornton, she whispered. Legally changed his name 8 years ago. Previous name, Marcus T. Williams. Rick frowned. So? People change their names. Marcus T. Williams. Michelle's voice was hollow. Licensed financial advisor in Georgia from 2015 to 2022. Specialized in estate planning and investment management for medical patients. She pulled up a photograph from an old business website. That same kind smile. That same expensive suit. That same face that had sat across from her dying mother, promising to help while he stole everything. The room spun. Michelle gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling. Michelle? Rick's voice seemed far away. Are you okay? He didn't just steal from you, Rick. Her voice came out broken, ragged. He's the one. The financial advisor who destroyed my mother's estate, who took her life insurance while she was dying, who stole Jamal's college fund, who left us with nothing. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Marcus Thornton killed my mother. Not directly, but he stole the money that could have paid for better treatment, for home care, for dignity in her final days. And then he changed his name and moved on to his next victim. Rick's face transformed from shock to horror to rage in the span of seconds. That's why you ended up serving tables. That's why you lost everything. Because of Marcus. He's been doing this for years, hasn't he? Michelle pulled up more records with shaking hands. Financial advisor scams, corporate espionage, always moving before anyone catches on. How many lives has he destroyed? How many families? Rick stood slowly, and Michelle had never seen such cold fury in someone's eyes. He sat at my father's funeral. He gave the eulogy. He held me while I cried. His voice was deadly quiet. And the whole time, he was planning to steal everything my father and I built. Michelle wiped her eyes roughly. We have 70 hours until the IPO. Until he executes his final attack and walks away with $300 million while you lose everything, and her voice cracked. I have to watch the man who killed my mother get away with it again.
No.
Rick's voice was steel. We're not watching anything. We're stopping him. He looked at Michelle with fierce determination. Can you build a trap? Something that will catch him in the act with evidence. So clear, he can't talk his way out. Michelle's grief crystallized into something sharp and focused. Purpose. I can do better than that. I can make him confess everything in front of witnesses. But it's going to be risky. I don't care about risk. Rick's jaw was set. I care about justice. For my company. For your mother. For everyone he's destroyed. Michelle pulled up a blank coding window. Her hands were steady now. Then let's make him pay for all of it. They didn't sleep. They couldn't. Michelle and Rick worked through the night fueled by rage, purpose, and enough coffee to kill a normal person. Michelle's fingers flew across the keyboard while Rick made calls to contacts in finance, law enforcement, corporate security. They were building a case, piece by devastating piece. Got another one, Michelle said at 6 a.m., her voice hoarse. Venture Tech Solutions. Marcus was their CFO in 2018. Company was thriving, about to go public, then suddenly collapsed due to system failures. He walked away with $20 million in short positions. Rick added it to their timeline. That makes 8. 8 companies in 15 years, all following the exact same pattern. Michelle pulled up corporate records, news articles, bankruptcy filings. The pattern was sickeningly clear once you knew to look for it. Marcus targeted mid-sized successful companies on the verge of major growth, IPOs, acquisitions, expansions. He'd join as CFO or senior financial officer, gain complete trust, then plant the seeds of destruction. Create crises that only he seemed able to understand. Steal during the chaos. Short the stock. Buy controlling shares for pennies. Then disappear before anyone connected the dots, usually with a name change or move to a new city. He's not just a thief, Rick said, staring at the timeline. He's a serial predator. This is what he does. This is who he is. And between corporate jobs, Michelle added, pulling up her own investigation, he runs financial advisor scams. She displayed a list of victims that made her sick. Patricia Dara was just one name among dozens. Cancer patients, widows, recent divorcees, people who are vulnerable, desperate, trusting. He poses as someone who cares, who wants to help, and then he bleeds them dry. Rick leaned closer to read the names. His jaw clenched. How many? Over 200 victims that I can trace. Probably more who never reported it. Michelle's voice was tight. Total estimated theft, $43 million. Maybe more hidden in offshore accounts we can't access. 43 million. Rick sank into his chair. And I brought him into my company. I gave him keys to everything. I trusted him with financial decisions that affected thousands of employees. He looked at Michelle with devastated eyes. Your mother died because of him. You lost everything because of him. And I handed him the opportunity to do it again. You didn't know, Michelle said quietly. That's his gift. He makes people trust him. He's perfected the art of being trustworthy while being a monster. How did no one catch him? 15 years, 8 companies, 200 victims. How is he not in prison? Michelle pulled up legal records. He's careful. Always stays just ahead of investigations. Changes names. Moves jurisdictions. His thefts are complex enough that by the time forensic accountants untangle them, he's gone. And his individual victims. She gestured at the list. Most are too devastated or ashamed to pursue legal action. They just want to survive. Rick was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence of Marcus's decades-long crime spree. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. I sat across from him yesterday. We had coffee. He asked about my mother, told me he was proud of what we'd built together. And the whole time he was planning to destroy me. That's what he does, Michelle said. He destroys people and makes them thank him for it. Rick stood up, his expression hardening into something Michelle had never seen before.
Cold. Determined.
Dangerous. Not this time. This time he's going to pay for all of it. Every company. Every victim. Your mother. Everything. Michelle met his eyes, and in that moment they weren't CEO and consultant. They were two people who'd been devastated by the same monster, who'd found each other across impossible odds, who were going to make sure justice finally caught up with a predator who'd evaded it for far too long. We have 68 hours until the IPO, Michelle said. Until he thinks he's won. We need to build a trap so perfect he can't escape. Evidence so overwhelming that every crime, every victim, every stolen dollar comes to light. Can you do it? Michelle thought about her mother dying in that hospital bed. About Jamal's frightened face when she told him they had nothing left. About 2 years of serving tables while her genius suffocated. About 200 victims who deserved justice. About Rick's devastated expression when he realized his mentor was destroying him. Yes, she said. But we need to let him think he's winning right up until the moment we destroy him. Rick's smile was cold and sharp. Then let's give him exactly what he expects. Right up until we take everything. They had 48 hours. 48 hours to build a trap sophisticated enough to catch a predator who'd evaded justice for 15 years. Michelle stared at her screens, her mind racing through possibilities, discarding failures, calculating risks. We can't just disable his code, she said, pacing Rick's office at 3 a.m. If we do, he'll know we found him. He'll disappear like he always does, change his name again, move to his next victim. So, what do we do? Rick asked. He looked exhausted, hollowed out by betrayal, but his eyes were sharp. We let him think he's winning. Michelle pulled up her code editor. I build a digital cage. His time bomb triggers exactly as planned. The system appears to crash. Payment failures cascade. Everything looks catastrophic. She started typing. But behind the scenes, every transaction is protected. Every piece of data is safe. And every single action he takes, every keystroke, every command, every access point, is recorded, tracked, and ready to be displayed in real time. Rick leaned forward. You want to expose him during the IPO announcement. In front of everyone. 1,500 investors and journalists watching him get arrested for corporate sabotage, stock manipulation, and fraud. Michelle's fingers flew across the keyboard. But that's just the beginning. Once we have him on the corporate crimes, the FBI can connect him to his previous companies, his financial advisor scams, all 200 victims. Can you build something that complex in 48 hours? Michelle met his eyes. I can build it in 36. But Rick, you need to understand the risk. If my code fails, if I make even one mistake, Titan Pay really crashes. Your company is destroyed. 3,000 people lose their jobs. Investors lose millions. And Marcus walks away clean. What are the odds you make a mistake? Honestly, Michelle pulled up her architecture designs. This is the most complex system I've ever attempted. I'm essentially building a parallel network that mirrors your entire payment infrastructure while appearing to fail catastrophically. One wrong calculation, one missed variable, one timing error, and it all falls apart. Rick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said simply, I trust you. Rick, you saved me once already. That first night, you saw what 15 experts missed and fixed it in 3 minutes. You've spent 2 weeks mapping systems that took my team years to build. You're brilliant, Michelle. I trust you. Michelle felt something crack open in her chest. When was the last time someone had trusted her like this? Believed in her capabilities without question? Okay, she whispered. Then I need to make some calls. She contacted the FBI at dawn, speaking with a financial crimes division agent named Sarah Chen. Michelle walked her through the evidence. Marcus's pattern of corporate sabotage, the financial advisor scams, the connection to her mother's case, the timeline of thefts spanning 15 years. She sent encrypted files containing transaction logs, corporate records, victim testimonies she compiled through the night. This is extensive, Agent Chen said, and Michelle could hear the controlled excitement in her voice. If even half of this is accurate, we're looking at one of the largest financial crime operations in recent history. It's all accurate, Michelle said. And in 45 hours, you can catch him in the act with 1,500 witnesses. But I need agents standing by. The moment I give the signal, you move. We'll be there. Michelle hung up and turned back to her screens. Rick had fallen asleep in the chair beside her desk, his coffee cold, his tie finally removed. She looked at him. This billionaire who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd believed her story when he had no reason to, who was risking everything on her abilities. She pulled up a fresh code window and began building their trap. Line by line, function by function, she constructed a digital masterpiece. A system that would appear to die while actually recording its own murder. Code that would let Marcus think he'd finally won right up until the moment it revealed every crime he'd ever committed. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, that Georgia Tech-trained genius mind operating at full capacity. She built redundancies and fail-safes. She wrote algorithms that would track Marcus's every move. She created visualizations that would display his theft network in real time for everyone to see. Michelle looked at the clock. 14 hours until the IPO. 14 hours until Marcus Thornton either walked away with $300 million or faced justice for 15 years of destruction. She took a deep breath and saved her work. The trap was set. Now there was nothing to do but wait and trust that genius, rage, and justice would be enough. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Michelle's story reminds us that brilliance exists everywhere, in the people we overlook, in the workers we ignore, in the faces we pass without seeing. The next time you encounter someone in a service job, remember, You might be standing in front of a genius who's just waiting for someone to see them. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their circumstances don't define their worth. Their time is coming. And remember, never underestimate the power of someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Before you go, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you thought of Michelle's journey. Where are you watching from? Your support means everything and helps me bring you more stories that celebrate the overlooked and the unstoppable. Thank you for being here.